All right, hi everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills as we continue to count down to Bills Broncos wild card weekend, Sunday 1 o'clock, Highmark Stadium. Adam Bonini, WGRZ TV, and Sal Majorana, of course, with the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And we like to get some sort of national perspective on this matchup. We always shoot for that here on the show. And for that, we bring in Tyler Sullivan, who is a staff writer for CBSSports.com. Tyler, welcome. How are you?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So what do you think? I mean, we've been kind of going all around this matchup this week. And, I think Adam and I would both agree that the Broncos as a number 7 seed are a little bit frisky. Are you seeing the same thing with that team?
Yeah, I think that they are. I mean, not as frisky as what we possibly could have seen with the Cincinnati Bengals sneaking in. Yeah. So I guess there's a win there. But ultimately, this is a game that I believe that Buffalo should win. But there is an opportunity for things to get a little hairy. I mean, this defense for the Denver Broncos is no joke. One of the best in the NFL. You look at any, meaningful statistical category. If they're able to keep this game close, then all of a sudden we're talking about a second half where it's Sean McDermott versus Sean Payton. And that's a little bit more of a toss-up than, let's say, Josh Allen versus Bo Nix.
Yeah,
right. I mean, that's it. I mean, coaching, it's the storyline that keeps coming back into this one. We'll get into that. But for the moment, let's talk about Josh Allen versus Bo Nix. And it's interesting because we've seen Allen evolve here and covered his entire career with the Bills, what he's become. And it's now interesting to see other young quarterbacks be compared to him, right? And Bo Nix, given his arm strength and his mobility, what he's able to do in the ad-lib, is that. He sort of resembles Josh in some ways, but you would think he's not at that level yet. He's developing as a rookie. What do you see in him? And on the other side of the ball, Josh going against that defense that you had talked about.
Yeah, just talking about Bo Nix to start, it really is kind of a remarkable evolution that we've seen him from week 1 to now. And a lot of that has to be credit to Sean Payton. I think we all kind of clowned on the Denver Broncos when they selected Bo Nix in the first round, saying, that's a little bit too high. It doesn't feel like it's going to reach the ceiling that it is. But Sean Payton clearly likes certain traits about him. And one of those, as you alluded to, is that ability to extend plays with his legs. And whether that is to scramble, to run the football, or to run to extend the passing opportunities, very similar to what we see with Josh Allen, obviously, at a much higher rate. You look at Bo Nix this season, I just have it in front of me, second most scrambles for first downs this season by any quarterback, not just the rookie quarterback. And he has the most first downs when the pocket breaks down, meaning just when he leaves the pocket, whether he's scrambling to run or to pass, he's throwing more first downs than any quarterback in the NFL right now. So when we're talking about this matchup now, it is going to be interesting to see how he is able to move the chains and keep this Denver offense on the field, which is something that I think is going to be very interesting, particularly because Buffalo hasn't been that great on third down this season. One of the bottom, I believe it's bottom 5 in the NFL in third down rate. So that's going to be one of those things that we look at early on. How is Denver doing on third down? And specifically, how is Buffalo doing getting them off the field? And that's kind of my rub in that first half. And then you talk about, Josh Allen going up against this Denver defense. It's best on best, right? That's really what it is. We're talking about an MVP favorite going up against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, in saying that, I do think that Josh has a little bit of an advantage here because one thing that Denver loves to do is blitz, and they're good at it. They're very good at attacking quarterbacks via the blitz. You look at what Josh Allen has been able to do, and I have it again in front of me here, 16 touchdowns, 1 interception against the blitz this season. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at early on in this matchup.
I think the whole Bo Nix storyline is so interesting because he was the 6th quarterback taken in that draft in the first 12 picks. Denver had the 12th pick. And there were these storylines that this is the guy that Sean Payton wanted. Well, I'm not sure. If the Broncos were picking 5th overall, I don't think Bo Nix would have been the pick. Now, that being said, I think what's really interesting about Bo Nix and his progression this year is that I think some of us forget the kid played 61 games of college football for two big-time programs at Auburn and the SEC, and then obviously at Oregon where he had more success. So I think that's partially why he's had such a good rookie season. This is not a kid. For instance, Josh Allen came into the NFL with 2 years of Division I experience. That was at Wyoming. This kid's coming in with a big resume, and he's played in big-time college games. So I think that's helped his development in his rookie year to become the player he's already become. What do you think of that, Tyler, as a rationalization for what we've seen from Bo Nix this year?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, you could even extend that to Jaden Daniels a little bit too, another rookie quarterback that's in these playoffs. Been in college a long time, been in big moments. It's not like, say, use Anthony Richardson, for example, in Indianapolis. He's not had a lot of time as a starter, and you're seeing that. The experience of playing in the SEC and playing in the Big Ten over the course of his collegiate career at major programs has to count for something, right? I mean, again, you're going into Highmark Stadium. That's going to be a hostile environment. But again, playing in the SEC, playing in the Big Ten, you are kind of used to going in those hostile environments. And it's certainly a different level of competition going from the NFL going from college to the NFL. But still, there is going to be a little bit of a comfort's the wrong word, right? You're never going to be comfortable in this type of scenario, but you're at least going to be familiar more so than other rookie quarterbacks.
That's on that point before Adam makes his next point. That's always something that I've always laughed at in the NFL is that we make this big deal about, these kids, these young kids, first, second, third year players going on the road in the NFL. Dude, Michigan goes into Ohio State and plays in front of 100,000 people. The exact opposite, Ohio State. These guys have all played in massive environments, maybe even more so. Rivalry games are even more intense in college than they can be in the pros. I just always laughed at that whole thing about how Bo Nix is going to come into Orchard Park and be afraid of Bills Mafia. It's just not true. And it's always been a pet peeve of mine. I'm glad you brought it up.
All right. Good points, gentlemen. Quick word from the sponsor here before we move on. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. The largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, NHL, college basketball, and UFC. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to get a welcome bonus on your first deposit. Also want to mention CBS's coverage this weekend on the air includes the NFL today, 4 p.m. Saturday ahead of Chargers-Texans, also streaming on Paramount+. And then before the Broncos and Bills, the NFL today at noon. Kickoff, of course, at Highmark Stadium is 1 p.m. With us is Tyler Sullivan of CBSSports.com, an NFL staff writer who'll be covering Bills Broncos. And getting back to that, you mentioned the Buffalo defense, right? And this would apply maybe to more than just Buffalo, Denver, like in terms of the Bills' legitimacy as a Super Bowl contender, right? You talked about the issues on third down, and they're one of the headlines. But, that defensive front has been inconsistent this year. They've been relatively good in the secondary against the pass. So they're kind of a bend but don't break, right? How much of a liability or an area of vulnerability maybe do you see that Buffalo defense being in this matchup against Denver and perhaps beyond it?
Yeah, no, I think it's more big picture than it is for this game. For the game pick, I think that Buffalo wins this game. I think that there's a possibility for it to be close, but ultimately I do think that they take care of business here. But as we look forward, we're looking at possible opponents where you're playing Derrick Henry, you're playing Lamar Jackson, you're playing Patrick Mahomes, and everything that he can do in Kansas City. We know that very up close and personal in terms of their head-to-heads over the years. If you can't get off the field with those elite quarterbacks, then, man, you're going to have a hard time. I keep going back to that game. What was it? I believe it was like week 16 or week 14 or week 15 against the Los Angeles Rams, where you're going up against Matthew Stafford, where, he's not at the peak of his powers right now, but that's a former Super Bowl champion with elite wide receivers, with a running game. It's a high-powered offense, and I think they went, 11 to 15 on third down that they allowed, and you just can't have that. Josh Allen had 6 touchdowns in that game, which is Herculean. But if you're telling me that Lamar Jackson is going to have that easy of a time on third down, Derrick Henry is going to have that easy of a time on third down going up, as you said, against that defensive front, yeah, that's where it kind of maybe limits the ceiling a little bit, or at least has you questioning the ceiling of this Buffalo team right now.
Yeah, I think the third down defense for the Buffalo Bills could end up being what cost them a chance to win a Super Bowl. They've been bad all year, even against some of the worst teams in the NFL. They've been bad on third down. They have allowed teams to keep drives alive far too much. And I know it sounds crazy. The Bills outscored their opponents by, I think it's plus 157. So it has not killed them, but in the playoffs, it could kill them. They're going to be going against, like you said, Tyler, these really good teams are in the playoffs. And I think Buffalo's third down defense, if they don't get that figured out, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is, because this is the same personnel, and they do not vary a whole lot of what they do on defense. McDermott and Babbage, they call their defense, and that's how they play. There's not a lot of variation. I think that's the biggest worry. I think it could be a problem this weekend. I mean, if Denver gets on a roll on offense and keeps Josh Allen off the field, it's a dangerous scenario for the Bills. And I think it's going to be their undoing at some point here in January.
I just to jump off of that, I think that one of the things that Buffalo is going to need to do in this game, and then in particular, and it's very rudimentary, but I think they just need to dictate how the game is played. If you come out with your hair on fire early and you get up on Denver, let's just use them as the example because they're playing them this weekend, well, then you're dictating a little bit of what Sean Payton's going to have to call on offense. He might want to be a little bit more conservative and kind of let Bo Nix ease in to this playoff game a little bit more. But if you have an opening drive touchdown, you're up 7-0, maybe you get up 10-0, you're changing the entire game script for them. You're putting them into a little bit more pass-heavy game scripts. You're trying to throw yourself back into the football game, and that allows you the opportunity to maybe take advantage of a poor throw from Bo Nix. Maybe you create a turnover in those type of scenarios. So that I'm right there with you. Something's going to have to change for them to change their third down woes. And maybe it's the offense, as weird as that sounds, putting a little bit more pressure on the opposing offense to match them throw for throw.
Well, that's a good segue into where I was about to go next, and that's that Buffalo offense. And they have had issues with fast starts this year. But, I mean, kind of in general, what this Bills offense has evolved into, right? Big storyline in the offseason was moving on from Stephon Diggs and what was going to happen in the passing game. And there were some issues with the explosiveness early in the year, and they trade for Amari Cooper, that sort of a thing. But you look at, what they've been able to do in that passing game and what Josh Allen, what he's kept the turnovers down. He's kind of played more within the scheme, right? And hit a variety of receivers. And then from a running game perspective, you got three backs really led by James Cook, right? I mean, we're talking historic balance, I guess is my point, right? First NFL team ever with 30-plus passing touchdowns and 30-plus rushing touchdowns. So they have the ability, to attack any defense, obviously, with that. And with Denver, if they're going to blitz, which is that's their DNA, right? I mean, I feel like Allen is capable of making them pay for that down the field a little bit. What do you see from Buffalo, what they've kind of arrived at offensively as they enter the postseason?
Yeah, I think that it's a recipe to succeed in the postseason. Sometimes you see these offenses, I think of the Baltimore Ravens of years past, where it's just so high flying during the regular season. You're like, boy, who's stopping this team? And then all of a sudden they get to the playoffs, go back to last AFC Championship game. They can't run the football. They can't do anything at the running back position because everybody's so central focus on, getting rid of Lamar Jackson in one way, shape, or form. I kind of feel like that could have been Buffalo's demise. But as you noted, you have James Cook, who has the most touchdowns in the league, right? Rushing touchdowns in the league this season. He is going to be an X factor for me in the playoffs. Of course, Josh Allen's the straw that stirs the drink. But if you're able to run the football effectively, and that's why I think, again, Baltimore's dangerous this time around with Derrick Henry. If you're able to run the football effectively, this is when it matters. This is the time of year where being able to stay on the field, as we've been talking about, to grind down defenses, physically running the football, which Buffalo can do absolutely with James Cook and obviously Josh Allen when he's able to get ready and run the football, which I assume he'll do to a unbelievable degree over this playoff run. That to me is the thing that's going to unlock this team. Sure, they're able to pass the rock around the field to a very efficient degree. I believe it's something like the Buffalo Bills have like 8 guys that have like 30 catches on the season, and that's well in front of a lot of other offenses in the NFL. That's what I think has kind of been great in the sense of losing Stephon Diggs this offseason. It has allowed Josh Allen to play a little bit freer, as you said, play within the system. What that really means is throw it to the open guy. You're not feeding one star wide receiver to kind of get him his touches and get him going early. You're just kind of playing point guard a little bit and throwing it to the open guy, dinking and dunking down the field, which I think has been huge for them.
Yeah, I think as we talk about the Bills offense going into this particular game, I think the running game is going to be paramount to their success. That's the way you slow down a team that rushes the passer like the Broncos. They blitz so much. You've got to catch them in some of those blitzing situations. And the Bills' offensive line has done a great job, whether it's been zone or gap runs. They've just done an outstanding job. And I think if the Broncos are going to be blitzing at the level that they've blitzed this season, there's going to be creases available. And that's where you've got to hammer them. And Adam mentioned slow starts for this team. They do need to get off to a good start and put Denver in the hole, put them, in a situation where they need to play catch up. Every quarterback plays better with the lead, and it's been particularly noticeable with Bo Nix and Denver. When they've gotten a lead with their rookie quarterback and that defense, they've been a dangerous team. So the Bills have got to avoid that, get them on their heels early. And as I said, I think the run game is going to be critical to that, to slow down that Denver pass rush and dictate what you want to do on offense in this game.
And just to follow that up, too, we're talking as lethal as this Denver pass rush is. You do have to give credit to the Buffalo front as well, where they have allowed the fewest sacks in the NFL. And yes, some of that is due to Josh Allen because he's just so mobile and so shifty, but you do have to give them credit there as well. I think that that's going to kind of be another best on best in terms of this matchup, those games within the game this coming weekend. And the other thing too, as we talked about, I just kind of want to emphasize getting off to a hot start for Buffalo, because Denver's defense, as much as we're praising them here too, they're even better in the second half. They allow the fewest second half points in the NFL this season. So, we're talking about, okay, if this game's close at halftime, Denver has shown you that they're able to get stronger in the second half as these games go on, particularly on defense.
All right. And a lot, very good point. And so you had mentioned earlier, and I do think, a lot of this gets down to coaching, right? Play calling, that sort of a thing, but specifically the matchup between Sean McDermott and Sean Payton, right? And you mentioned what happens if it's tight when it gets to the fourth quarter. And that's sort of the elephant in the room for the Buffalo Bills. And Sean McDermott, for all the success they've had, for the 5 straight division titles, for the culture they've built, for the roster they've built, all of those things, there's a history of coming up short in the playoffs. And a lot of that having to do with coaching. 13 seconds is the primary example that'll kind of loom over Sean McDermott until he's able to get this team over the top and reach the Super Bowl with Josh Allen as quarterback. I guess my question for you is, from where you sit, do you have questions about Sean McDermott? I like to think he's a hell of a head coach, and I like to think the answer is yes, that he's the guy that can win a championship for this team. But how large are those questions in your mind, I guess?
Yeah, and I think it's fair to have those questions, right? I mean, again, it's if you have the resume in the postseason that Sean McDermott has had, as you referenced, the 13 seconds in things like that along the way, without a championship, with the roster that you've had, specifically the quarterback that you've had over the last few years, there's obviously going to be some questions of whether or not this is the guy to get it done. I do believe that he is capable of taking a team deep into the playoffs, winning a Super Bowl and all that. But it's going to be fascinating to see him go on this run here, because as we're talking about, there's a possibility that he's playing against or coaching against Super Bowl winning head coaches pretty much down the line, right? You're talking about Sean Payton right out of the gate in the postseason. Of course, Andy Reid, a Super Bowl champion, maybe even Harbaugh in Baltimore as well. You're saying, okay, all of these guys have made it to that mountaintop. They know these intricacies of what it takes to win, what levers to pull, and what wires to cut as we go down the stretch. As much as we have a little bit of confidence that Sean McDermott has been able to do it, we haven't seen it go all the way yet.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit different on this topic, because I recognize there's been shortcomings with Sean McDermott in the postseason, but I have always, my entire career, have made the point that players play. I understand the coach has got to put you in the best situation possible, scheme-wise and all that. I understand that coaches make critical calls on whether they go for it in fourth down or whether to kick the damn ball in play in Kansas City and run some time off the clock. I understand that. Ultimately, these games come down to players who have to perform, and I'm not ready to jump on the fire McDermott bandwagon, even if they were to lose Sunday in this game. I just have always believed it's the players that have to do it, and that's where Buffalo's shortcomings have been. They have had great players on this team for at least the last 5 years that they've won the division title, and for whatever reason, they have found ways to come up short in the big moments, mostly on the defensive side, by the way. They've had really good defenses most of his tenure in the regular season, and that's the unit that's killed them the last 3 years they've been eliminated. It comes down to the players, and they're the ones that have got to get this team over the hump. McDermott plays a big role. I understand that, and I'm probably in the minority on that because everyone loves to criticize him because of the failures, but players got to perform. They got to run, tackle, all that stuff, and that's just where I've always sat on that issue.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. Just to say real quickly, you say it's players that make the Super Bowl run. It's also quarterbacks too. Like if Josh Allen goes nuclear over this next month, then of course they're going to have zero problems running the table because he's that good. I mentioned Harbaugh in Baltimore. Like Joe Flacco went nuclear during that run, and he was just a man that was not going to be stopped, as crazy as it sounds, in 2025, but that's what it was at the time. And so same thing, if Josh Allen just goes nuts over this next couple of weeks, then I don't know if a third down call or a timeout in a certain situation is really going to matter. It's going to matter when Josh Allen makes a throw.
And the thing with Allen, he's played 10 games in his playoff career. He's averaged 328 yards of total offense per game. It's the highest in NFL history. He's done everything he could possibly do to get this team over the hump, and he's been let down by other members of the team, again, as I've said, specifically on defense. So he's been unbelievably great in the playoffs, and he just needs some help this year from his coach, as I said, too, as part of it. But he needs help from the rest of his teammates if they're going to do anything. And they are going to be going through, like you said, it's a gauntlet. Peyton and Denver, probably Harbaugh in Baltimore, and then Andy Reid in Kansas City. That's a hell of a run to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and of course, Sean McDermott comes from the defensive background, right? So that's where a lot of those questions kind of, come from in terms of how Allen has performed in these games and what the outcomes have been and the shortcomings on the defensive side. In raising that point, as we wrap this up, I will say that regardless of the outcome on Sunday, I think Sean McDermott's seat is ice cold. The opposite of hot. We're not talking about, in raising this, I'm not projecting on job security here at all. It's just more of a outcome based, like you said earlier, Tyler, what happens if it gets tight in the fourth quarter and, it's the chess match and all of those things, McDermott against Peyton, that type of a thing. I think that's very interesting, and there is history to consider. All right. We appreciate it. Tyler Sullivan, we'll look for your work at cbssports.com. Enjoy the playoffs. Thanks for being with us.
Guys. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, Tyler. We appreciate it.
For Sal Majorana of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, and Tyler Sullivan, cbssports.com. I'm Adam Benini, WGRZ TV, Buffalo, and Sports Talk Live. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills.